This is the clay pots drawing. I started out with this drawing with just kind of an idea that I dropped in OneNote. So I used OneNote on a tablet, and I was actually in a meeting, and I started doodling these different little clay pots. And eventually, I ended up with this like a thumbnail sheet of all these really, really rough drawings of the clay pots, but it ended up being pretty close to what the finished drawing was going to look like. This was my original kind of exploration of how I wanted to draw the pot. So the drawings here are pretty crude, just um, some rough pot drawings, and trying to figure out how realistic do I want to look. Do I want them to look really cartoony, or do I want them to look kind of realistic? You know, the hands, do the hands need to look realistic, or the arms realistic? You'll notice like I eventually simplify the arms, and I kind of settled on this kind of in between area where they're a little cartoony, but they also have realistic proportions and things too, at least on the human hands. But on the pot itself, it's got more like cartoony Disney-fied hands. All right, so the you saw in that one section there was like a little pop-up there with the pot. So these aren't in the correct order that I drew them all, but I kept bringing up the ones that I already drawn as kind of a reference for the next one. One of the things that was difficult about doing this was the hands. The hands was hands down the hardest part of this drawing, and it was really good practice for me because I had to reference hands and draw hands, and it was just, you can see in this one right here that I'm doing it. I draw the hand, this one particular hand, over and over and over again, and you'll see me cheat just a little bit at the end. I finally capitulated, and I brought in a little picture of a hand, and then I kind of like traced over it. I went through different iterations as far as the pots were concerned, like what positions they're going to be in. As a matter of fact, one of the drawings that I made, I ended up not even using it in the final drawing because I just didn't like the position that it was in, or the gestures and things like that of the pot. But one of the things that I learned from this is kind of like a sequence of flow. So I just drew a bunch of pots at first, and then I realized they don't really lead into the next one. They're not telling a narrative. They're just a bunch of pots with this like pot resisting the potter. And so I went back and kind of redid the design for a bunch of them to try to tell a little bit more of a sequence of events, to have a narrative story that I'm telling while you scan through the different pots, as he is first resistant and then becomes more and more rebellious, and is like actively fighting, and then thinks he can take things over his own. He messes it up. The potter comes back, wants to try to help him again, and he refuses again, and then makes it even worse. This last drawing here, really, you can see I went through a bunch of different iterations of it, but I needed it to look like the final picture, the position that he was laying in, because that's going to lead into this picture where he's still laying in that final position. And I debated whether or not in these to give him hands, but he needed the hands for continuity's sake. And it was even a bigger question on the last one. So I drew this, my mental image of what a pizza oven is. That's kind of really it. It's a pizza oven. The last one here, this is like the last sketch that I did, and you can, again, I really struggled with whether or not, like, what facial expression he was going to have, and whether or not he was going to have hands. Hands were the last thing I added because it just seemed, honestly, you admit it now, a urinal with hands is kind of weird. But he just needed to have that gesture of like, hey, why did you make me like this? I mean, that was the verse that was going through my mind, you know, where the potter says to the pottery says to the potter, you know, why did you make me like this? But you can see that it was like his own resistance that put him there, and then he was hardened into that position, and used as could have been a vessel of honor, but instead, because of his rebellion, was used as a vessel of dishonor. God's still going to get use out of him, but just maybe not the use that he would have liked. So here's the final layout. I redrew everything. So once I was done, this was the other lesson that I learned. Not only did I need narrative continuity, but I also had to go back and have physical continuity between the different pots. And I noticed that the rim of some pots was different than the other ones, or the hand shapes were different, and I ended up having to redraw everything. Then I did the coloring, and I struggled a little bit on the last picture, whether or not he didn't really. I felt like he didn't like didn't look like he was that attached to the wall, and the plumbing doesn't show up as much. And in the final version, I put kind of a drop shadow almost behind the urinal, but I didn't like it. You know, and even today, that's the one I ended up putting on public, and it's really the only. There's only one other spot, and that's inside the pizza oven. Really, that there's any gradient in this at all. Everything else is like all the shadows are real distinct. And so, in the arms, the human arms have a little bit of a gradient. But yeah, I wish I had just changed the background color of the wall. But I thought the kind of like ocean green would make you think men's restroom a little bit better. Nice thing about doing digital, I was able to create just one spinning board there and then just duplicate it and stick it under all the pots, and made that part a lot easier. And anyway, so that's the whole drawing, and I liked it. It you know, it's I forgot the other thing. I went through this drawing, and there was tons of text. Like almost every single position had text, and that he was saying things like, "Don't touch me. I've got this. I can do this on my own." And in the end, I ended up stripping all that text out. So I didn't want to. Originally, I had all that text in the pictures, and one of the books that I was reading at the time when I was drawing it, actually I have it right here, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, and the book talks about symbolism, and it really stresses the fact that in a comic book or a visual medium, that the medium itself should do a lot of the talking. Kind of ironic since I'm talking right now, but I realized that a lot of the text that I had in the drawings was essentially telling the audience what I could show them, and that actually really helped me to tighten up the way that I drew tighten up the way that I designed that comic. And I feel like in the end it definitely made it where the images were telling the story and not like the text in every single little frame. So anyway, but that's the whole drawing. I felt like I did it told the message that I wanted to tell, and I had some people that liked it and some people that didn't, some people that got it, some people that didn't. But it was the first drawing that I did that was had multiple frames like this. It's not the very first one, but one of the first ones I've done, and it was a big learning process for me to try to like have to work on the hands and the continuity and telling the narrative. And so I hope to do some more of them like this. Thanks.